Hello everyone, welcome back. It's 2021 and we are jumping into the 10th year of Dragon Ball Dissection. How is that even possible? And that is rhetorical, so please don't explain to me the passage of time. When we last left off in part 13 of the Majin Buu arc, we met Majin Buu. Took us almost an entire year, but we found him, and just like how Dabra took out Kibito to assert his dominance as the big guy of a big guy little guy pairing, natural selection has seemingly won out once more. While all of this has been going on, the exposed, humiliated Goten and Trunks have run into Videl. This is literally the only reason she was allowed to tag along into the main quest as long as she did, because now she gets to pass on the information to characters who are more important than her. The boys are practically salivating at all this talk of Madoshis and Majins and rush off to join the fun. Now, however, they have stopped because they feel ki from two different fights, one they recognize as their dad's, and the other they don't know. Dads are all well and good, but the unknown fight could involve the Majin, and that's much more interesting, so they head over in that direction. Speaking of dads, Goku feels the Dabra Go Splat ki as well, and is beginning to realize that maybe this wasn't such a good idea. He tries to convince Vegeta to give this up by reminding him of the danger to his family. Vegeta rants that he sold his soul to remove this compassion, yada yada yada, but Goku calls his bluff. Yeah, all that senseless murder was just a bluff. He didn't really sell his soul, he's just an awful human being. Vegeta acquiesces and agrees to team up with Goku to fight Buu. Yeah, that's right, Goku insists they need to fight together, which proves that he has no problem fighting alongside others when the plot demands it. However, it turns out the plot does not demand it, so as soon as Vegeta gets his Senzu, he punishes Goku for daring to suggest a fight can be more than one-on-one by knocking his ass out. Interestingly, Goku has so mastered Super Saiyan that he even holds on to the form when he's unconscious. How cool is that? Well, at least for a little while, then it changes back between chapters. So yeah, I know I've already beaten this dead horse into the ground until he's disintegrated and reformed into a bottle of Elmer's glue. But this is another one of those moments that solidifies why I hate Vegeta's so-called evil turn. However, in this case I'm filled more with disappointment because the good ideas are right there within reach, but aren't quite grabbed. Goku hits the nail on the head asserting that Vegeta does still care about his family, something Vegeta all but admits with his heated denial and this seething panel of ellipses. This is really an exchange that could have helped sell a moral conflict, and it comes so close. In the weeks following my second video on the subject, I've received many replies suggesting that this fight is supposed to be unsatisfying because it reflects Vegeta getting what he thinks he wants, only for it to ultimately fail to live up to his expectations. Well, I have two things to say about that. Making a fight unsatisfying for the characters is an entirely different matter from making a fight unsatisfying for the audience. I've always remembered this little nugget I heard in one of my college acting courses. Never play a character as bored because you will simply come across as boring. So I maintain that Goku and Vegeta is a nothing fight with very little in the way of emotional stakes or even memorable choreography, and if that was indeed intentional, that was the wrong move. Secondly, I'm all about the idea of Vegeta feeling let down over the whole thing. Unfortunately, I feel that getting there requires a large amount of audience interpretation because I just don't see it here in the text. The passion, the lies we tell ourselves, come through in this one panel, but it just doesn't carry through anywhere else. Vegeta stopped acting like an obsessed madman long before now and settled back into his standard demeanor, which undercuts that this moment is supposed to represent a shift. And where is that fire, that righteous anger Goku had when he threatened to kill Kaioshin? What we get has all the gravitas of two buddies late for a meeting because they got caught up playing video games. Ah, crap, look at the time, we were supposed to go fight Boo! The whole thing is so casual. I don't see Vegeta coming to a realization, I see Goku nagging him until Vegeta's all, yeah, okay, whatever. Then, as soon as he does, the switch is immediately flipped and Vegeta carries all of this guilt he's already fully accepted. None of it feels earned. I see the kernels of the ideas that people are praising it for, but they're the ones popping it, not the story. That said, I never thought of it myself, so I always appreciate you guys chiming in and making me think in ways I'd never thought of before, especially since I really like this. Drop this casual tone and give Vegeta's evolution a consistent through line, and this scene could go a long way to making the story thread work. Meanwhile, Shin's supple cheekbones are not having much luck against the power of Majin Buu. To add insult to injury, Buu's facial structure proves much more adaptable to fighting. Buu is a malleable rubber monster, and any damage inflicted on him, he can simply mold back into the perfect shape. Again, we have an infinitely regenerating villain because we just can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, but at least Buu makes the whole exercise much more visually engaging than Cell did. It's not a lot, but it helps, and it ties into his characterization much better. We'll be seeing a lot of creativity in Buu's usage of skills. Before long, Buu buys Gohan a first-class ticket to anywhere but here, a trip he probably wouldn't come back from if Kaioshin didn't pull some quick moves. Gohan is down for the count, and unlike Goku, his Super Saiyan doesn't stick around at sleepy time. Goten and Trunks arrive at the battle but keep a low profile, amazed at these perfect Kuririn and Piccolo life-size statues. But any geek knows you don't let children touch your collectibles, because before you can say, "It's mint in box," Trunks has shattered Piccolo into tiny little pieces. Whoops. However, the fact that Piccolo could still be shattered in such a way should be an indication that Dabra is not actually dead. Sure enough, he has already crashed the party by running Buu through with a spear. Like the jilted ex, Dabra pleads with Babidi that this Majin Buu is no good, and that he promises to change if Babidi will just take him back. Obviously, the impaling is no problem for Buu, so we get the battle of the two minions while the Master watches. It reminds me in the best way of Tao Pai Pai versus Blue. Just like in that battle, it's obvious the old minion's days are numbered, and he probably should have kept to himself rather than returning home to roost. Just like in that battle, the old minion only exists here as an object lesson in how much better the new villain is. And just like in that battle, the new guy proves his worth with an effortless win that is both horrifying and hilarious. With Tao Pai Pai, that was stabbing Blue in the temple with his tongue. With Buu, it's the ability to instantly turn his opponent into a giant cookie and eat him. It doesn't get much more creative than that. You know, I feel for Dabra, I really do. It can't be easy to watch your revered boss not only fail to stand up to you in the face of workplace violence, but to actually encourage it. It has to be even worse when you consider that Dabra is brainwashed to love Babidi, or, whatever Babidi does to these people. Again, not very clear. Dabra definitely has enough free will to defy Babidi's #1 priority. But at the same time, I'm compelled to agree with Babidi here. Dabra kinda sucks. He's not all that interesting. Buu has so much more going for him, so if I have to choose between which of the two I'd rather have in the story, it's Buu by a mile. Speaking of Buu, you know something? In Toriyama's accompanying note for chapter 465, he has this to say. People ask me if there might be a model for Majin Buu in the editorial department, but to be clear, there isn't? I think? I don't know. Does this mean the guidebooks were talking out of their asses at asserting that Buu was modeled after Takeda? Or is Toriyama's oddly specific denial here what launched speculation in the first place? Oh, I would never want anyone to think that my editor might be the inspiration for Buu. It's totally not true. Question mark? Ellipses? Wink wink? Upon Dabra's death, Kuririn returns to life. Piccolo, however, that's just awkward. And you can tell Trunks' sense of responsibility is not developed yet, as he's more worried about being ratted out than he is about killing someone. He is his father's son. But it turns out there's nothing to rat out because Piccolo's just fine despite his severed foot lying there on the ground. Piccolo declares as long as his head's intact, he can regrow his entire remaining body. Thanks. I hate it. When I spent so much of the last arc criticizing Cell's Piccolo-derived regeneration for not being like Piccolo at all, I didn't want you to fix it by making Piccolo like Cell. It's so pointless anyway. It's not like this is setting up some utility we'll see later, it's just a thing that happens to service a gag that's not even that funny. Yay. And suddenly Vegeta reappears with a bang. If you haven't noticed, there are a lot of shifts in this section of the story. In this video alone, I've covered Goten and Trunks, Goku and Vegeta, Gohan and Buu, Dabra and Buu, Piccolo and Kuririn, and now Vegeta and Buu. While all of this makes it hard for me to write about it without feeling scattered, I like the overall effect of reading it. The story feels full, with several threads interweaving, sometimes connecting, sometimes departing. Normally the guys standing on the sidelines are there for no other reason than to make obvious commentary on the battle. At most, they can fill in the late arrival savior of what's going on so that everyone's on the same page. But I think it's much more fun to not be on the same page. We as the audience know everything that's happened so far, but now we get to see 3 different sets of characters who all have different limited perspectives of what has happened, now trying to catch up. While I'll have some issues with it later, that's perhaps best exemplified by Gohan's absence. Vegeta no longer feels Gohan's ki, so he assumes he's been killed and says as much. Piccolo overhears this and assumes that Vegeta, who hasn't been turned to stone this whole time, actually knows what he's talking about rather than making a guess himself. That's dynamic and causes the interaction and exposition to not simply feel like fluffy flavor in between fighting. And while I joked earlier about Piccolo and Kuririn being brought along for no reason, it really does benefit the story to hold them back for later. Now that Goku and Gohan are unconscious, we need other characters to fill the ranks, and this configuration brings a refreshingly different set of strategies than the let's rush headlong into danger ethos from earlier. Not only that, but it gives us our first taste of Piccolo's difficulty in keeping the kids under control, which will become a major part of the latter half of this story arc. This has shades of Cell's Endless Island adventure that I grew so tired of 2 years ago, but that amounted to little more than a perpetual swapping out of fighters. This is contextually far more interesting. So Vegeta finally gets to do what he wanted to since the beginning and blows up the stupid ship. Goodbye, generic blob minions, we hardly knew ye. Unfortunately, his fight against Boo goes about as well as you'd expect with a guy for whom being stabbed is a minor inconvenience. Trunks witnessed Boo being stabbed earlier, but still thinks when it's his papa doing it, that's gonna take him down. But while Vegeta holds his own for a while, even prompting Piccolo to say he's stronger than Gohan against Cell, the good times can't last forever. He eventually annoys Boo enough that he pulls out another crazy fun power. He pulls off some of his own body, stretches it like taffy, and then traps Vegeta in it, leaving him completely vulnerable to Boo sitting on him and beating him senseless. Like all of Boo's best moves, it's equal measure silly and brutal. This finally prompts Goten and Trunks to make their presence known, jumping in and saving Vegeta. Vegeta, in turn, once again demonstrates how he feels about fights that aren't one-on-one. No, I'm just kidding. It's at this moment that Vegeta realizes he's going to have to sacrifice himself to defeat Boo. Or, not accomplish anything, but it's the thought that counts. And while I still feel this doesn't do nearly enough, that it can't possibly do enough, to make me think of Vegeta as anything other than a spoiled, murderous tyrant, this at least makes some headway. Giving Vegeta this tender moment of humanity with his son, who doesn't understand at all what has happened and what will happen, makes the scene all the more heartbreaking. If Toriyama was scattering characters around at random, he certainly makes Goten and Trunks' path from fraudulent competitors to arriving just in time to witness this feel like a master maneuvering chess pieces. There's a wonderful parallel between the Vegeta of the Cell arc, who abuses his son for standing in his way, versus this Vegeta, who commits the same action against both children in order to protect them. This makes me think there's potential in these two serving as the unknowing catalyst to putting Vegeta back on the right track, as opposed to here where they show up after Vegeta's flipped his switch back to good. In other words, maybe they should have chosen to follow after their dads after all. For his part, now that stealth is no longer an option, Piccolo has jumped into the fray as well, confronting Bobby D while Boo is recovering from Trunks' earlier kick. Without anyone to protect him, Bobby D bargains by reminding Piccolo that he's the only one who can put Boo back in his seal, something Kaioshin had earlier expressed hope might happen. But Piccolo wasn't around to hear that, and I'm with him on this one. It seems unlikely Bobby D'd ever do it before Boo has destroyed the world, so Piccolo cuts him in half and lets his carcass, fittingly, fall into the devastating pit made by his own servant. After the ad hoc surgery, Piccolo notices Vegeta beating the kids and puts 2 and 2 together. I really have nothing to complain about in regards to the exchange between these two. I will say it once again proves that Piccolo is no longer Piccolo, but God in a Piccolo suit, but I like it. Upon Piccolo confirming that Vegeta plans to die, Vegeta asks if he'll get to encounter Goku in the afterlife. Piccolo pulls no punches here. There's no anger or malice, just a matter-of-fact explanation of what's going to happen. You're evil, you won't get rewarded like Goku, you'll go to hell, your soul will be cleansed and then reincarnated into something totally different. And remember that Piccolo doesn't even know what Vegeta just did. Likewise, there is no bereavement or bargaining on Vegeta's part, but simply a grim resignation, the perfect counterpoint to his earlier tortured whining. These stakes needed to be explicitly stated. We're used to the cushy Dragon Ball heaven where the only material change a character has to worry about is having a cartoony-looking halo over his head. In the past, that has still been enough to render a grisly death meaningful. But Vegeta's actions have been so horrific that that's just not enough of a punishment this time. Making Vegeta's sacrifice an actual sacrifice, for now, and making him acutely aware that his own death will not benefit him personally in any way, is important. As Piccolo later tells Kuririn, for the first time, Vegeta is fighting for someone other than himself. I'm sick enough of Vegeta that it's hard for me to feel too much sympathy for him, but in order to be somewhat objective, I have to do a little bit of compartmentalizing of my feelings. This doesn't undo all the complaints I had in Part 12, but taken on their own, these moments leading up to Vegeta's death really do knock it out of the park. Chapter 467 ends with Vegeta's death, and opens with a title page that makes such an outcome fairly obvious. Aside from the nostalgic smiling Saiyan arc Vegeta, it is literally called Farewell Proud Warrior. While it's probably a savvy marketing move, I also think it's the right decision for the story. It allows the audience to see the inevitability of his death play out in all of his actions leading up to it. While I think it's fair to argue that a lot of titles in the Dragon Ball franchise needlessly pile on the spoilers, I wouldn't have it any other way in this case. But there's something I really wish the Kanzenban release had not taken out. Because it is missing, I wonder if it was not Toriyama's idea at all, but something the Jump staff added in later. I'm referring to this accompanying poem. As dew appears, as dew vanishes, such is my life. Everything in this world is but a dream within another dream. Barring one small change to generalize it for Dragon Ball, this is the death poem of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the warlord who had unified Japan back in the 16th century, and it reflects the fleetingness of life and its accomplishments. I'm not sure how fitting it is to compare Toyotomi to Vegeta. After all, Toyotomi was a peasant who rose to power. It was probably chosen for no other reason than that it would be a well-known poem that happens to fit with the circumstances. The fleetingness of life is a universal sentiment, which doesn't necessarily affect the Dragon Ball characters, but very much fits the spiritual prognosis Piccolo hands down to Vegeta. But there are certainly some parallels in their legacies forged in battle. At the very least, it does work to further sell the idea of this being a grand tragedy about to play out. And I think the poem helps lend some added gravitas that Vegeta does not perhaps deserve, but buoys the scene nevertheless. Within the story, Vegeta takes a moment to say his goodbyes to the three people he'll miss the most: Bluma, Trunks, and Kakaroto. And while a lot of the art is looking pretty rough lately, Toriyama proves he can definitely still create amazing drawings when he wants to. There is so much wistful emotion in this image of Vegeta. So with Piccolo and the others heading for the hills, and Buu returning to the action, with a massive outpouring of all of his ki, Vegeta readies himself to make the ultimate statement of his entire life. An action that can have but one unmistakable interpretation. I care about Chaozu! So that's the dissecting of Dragon Ball for today. If you're just tuning in, this is an ongoing series with well over 100 episodes dating back to 2012. So if you enjoyed this, you might enjoy binging the near decade's worth of content. And remember that if you join this lovely list of luscious patrons, you're not only supporting the channel, but receiving fun rewards like your name in the credits, or getting to see videos like this one a week early. From here on out, we're stepping into a post-Vegeta world. I can't wait to find out what that's like. See you next time!